All right, so we're diving into the 7 habits today. And I gotta be honest, when I first picked it up, I was a little bit, skeptical. Another self-help book.
Yeah, I get that.
But then I actually read it,
It's one of those, huh?
and it blew me away. Covey's not messing around. He's not giving us some, motivational fluff.
No, not at all. It's deep stuff.
Yeah.
And what gets me is how relevant it still is, decades later.
I know, right? Like, in a world that's obsessed with these quick fixes and life hacks and all that, the 7 habits is about building something way more substantial.
Exactly. It's about character.
And that's what we're going to unpack today, how this book, it gives you this framework, right,
Yeah.
for building that lasting personal change, not just, checking off items on a to-do list.
It's not about those little tips and tricks, right?
Right.
It's about something much deeper.
So we've got some really interesting excerpts here to work with, and I think a good place to start might be with this idea of the personality ethic versus the character ethic. Have you ever fallen into that trap?
Oh, all the time. Especially in the past. I mean, it's tempting, right?
It is.
To focus on those outward appearances, like we're trying to project some image of success.
Oh, 100%. And Covey, he tells this great story about this. It's about when he was trying to help his son improve his grades in school.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Because at first, he's doing what most of us would do, right?
Right.
Trying to find that quick fix.
Yeah, like what's the technique? What's the thing we can apply?
Exactly. But nothing was really sticking. Like those long-term changes just weren't happening.
And that's when he realizes he needs to shift his focus.
Right. It wasn't about his son's performance, really. It was about his son's character.
And that's the foundation.
Yeah.
And he uses this analogy of a map, right?
Yeah.
If you're using an inaccurate map, it doesn't matter how hard you try to follow it, you're never going to reach your destination.
Because the map itself is flawed.
Right. So are we saying, like, throw out all self-help books? Is that the takeaway here?
Not necessarily. It's more about understanding where they fit in.
Right.
Right. It's not about rejecting those outward changes completely, but recognizing that real lasting change, it comes from within.
Oh, I see.
And that's what those 7 habits offer.
Yeah.
Like, here's how you can actually cultivate that inner strength, that integrity that then, naturally leads to those better habits, to those better behaviors.
Okay, so it's like you can't just put the cart before the horse, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You need that solid foundation first. You got to build the foundation before you even start thinking about the walls, the roof.
And those 7 habits are the foundation.
Yeah, they're those building blocks, that base. And then from there, we can start moving from dependence to independence.
Okay.
And then ultimately it's interdependence, and that's where things get really interesting. But maybe that's for later.
Oh, you can't just tease that. You have to tell us more.
Yeah.
But all right. I'll let you keep some of the mystery for now. So how about we pump the brakes a little bit and really dig into this whole building the foundation idea. Where do we even begin?
It all starts with realizing that we actually have control.
Mm.
We have control over our own lives, even when it feels like everything's, totally chaotic.
That's powerful stuff.
And that's the heart of those first 3 habits.
Yeah. Oh,
People calls them private victories. It's about mastering ourselves, getting ourselves right before we can even think about effectively leading or influencing anyone else.
so that's like taking responsibility for our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own actions, right? That's where the change really begins.
Absolutely, yeah, it all starts with you,
Yeah.
with ourselves.
It's just sometimes it feels like, we don't have control, like when you're stuck in traffic, right?
Oh, tell me about it.
Or dealing with a frustrating coworker or, just those days it's easy to feel like, well, this is just how I am. I'm just reacting.
It's like we're on autopilot.
Yes, exactly.
But that's what I love about Covey, is that he challenges us there, right? Like he's saying, hey, let's shift our perspective a bit. He calls it a paradigm shift.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's like recognizing that we always have a choice.
Really.
Even when we can't control the situation itself, we can control how we respond.
It makes me think of that optical illusion, the one I'm talking about, with the old woman and the young lady.
Yes. Classic example, right?
It's the same image, but 2 people can look at it and see something totally different.
Totally. And the thing is, whatever we see, that becomes our reality. It shapes our thoughts, our feelings, even our actions.
It's true.
And that's what that first habit, that be proactive, is all about recognizing that power we have, that power of choice.
Okay, but how does that actually work, practically? Because it's easy to say, choose your response, but what if you're dealing with something really tough, really frustrating?
Right. It can't just be some feel-good thing, right? It has to actually work. Well, Covey uses this incredibly powerful example in the book. It's the story of Viktor Frankl.
Oh, yeah, the Holocaust survivor.
Yeah, exactly. And he talks about finding, even in a concentration camp,
Wow.
he found the last of human freedoms.
Such a powerful phrase.
It really is. Because what he realized was, even in that situation, the most extreme situation you can imagine, he still had the freedom to choose his attitude, his internal response to what was happening to him.
Oh.
He couldn't control the situation, obviously,
No.
but he could control his thoughts, his feelings about it.
That's intense. And that's something that, we can all, I don't know how to say this without sounding cheesy, but we can all apply that to our lives, right? Even if our problems, thankfully, don't even compare.
Right, exactly. It's about finding that inner strength.
Right.
And for that, Covey gives us this great tool. He talks about the circle of concern and the circle of influence.
Okay, I like this already. Keep going.
So picture it, a big circle,
Right.
And that represents everything you're concerned about, all your worries, everything. That's your circle of concern.
Mine would be like the size of the moon.
Right. And then inside that, there's this smaller circle, and that's your circle of influence. These are the things you can actually control. And proactive people, they focus their energy on that inner circle.
Ah, I get it.
Yeah.
Instead of just getting overwhelmed by all the things you can't control.
Precisely. You focus on what you can actually do something about.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So less worrying, more doing. But how do we know what to do?
Well, that brings us to habit 2. Begin with the end in mind. And this is all about living with purpose, having that clear vision, What do you actually want your life to be about?
This sounds deep.
It is. It really is. Like,
It-
imagine it, right? You're at your own funeral.
Whoa. Okay, that got real dark real fast.
It's a little morbid, but stay with me here.
All right, I'm with you.
What do you want people to be saying about you? Like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave?
Okay, I see where you're going. It's about figuring out what really matters.
Yeah, and it's not just about the end,
Mm-hmm.
right? But by starting there, with that picture of the life you want, the person you want to be, it actually makes those daily decisions easier.
Oh, I see. Because you're always coming back to that vision.
Like having a compass, right?
Yeah.
It guides your choices.
Okay, I like that.
So we're not just drifting along, reacting to whatever comes up. We're being intentional. We're making choices that align with what we actually value.
But we only have so much time and energy, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to habit 3. Put first things first. Because here's the thing. Effectiveness isn't about time management, really. It's about priority management. It's about making sure our actions match our values and goals, even when it's hard.
That's the tough part.
It is, and we all struggle with it. But Covey gives us this great framework.
Oh, with the quadrants, right.
Yeah, exactly. He breaks down tasks based on urgency and importance, and it's so helpful for just visualizing where your time and energy are really going.
And realizing sometimes that we're not spending it on the right things.
Exactly. We get so caught up in the urgent that we forget about the important.
This is so true.
But these first 3 habits, these private victories, they lay the groundwork.
Yeah.
It's about that self-mastery, that inner strength and integrity. And once we have that foundation, that's when we can really start to build something amazing in our relationships with others.
Okay. So this is where we move from me to we.
Exactly. And that's where those public victories come in. It's taking all this great stuff we've been talking about, this inner work, and seeing how it plays out in our interactions with everyone else.
Okay, you've definitely got my attention. Let's hear about these public victories. Public victories, huh? So now we're gonna learn how to, win arguments and get people to do what we want.
Well, not exactly. It's not about, manipulating people or anything like that.
Yeah.
Think of it more like it's more about realizing that real success, the kind that lasts, it involves collaboration, empathy, really building those relationships that benefit everyone involved.
Okay,
Right?
yeah, I get that. But how do we actually make that happen? Because relationships can be tough, Everyone's got their own opinions, their own priorities. Sometimes it feels like you're speaking totally different languages.
100%. And that's why I think this next habit is so important. Habit 4. Think win-win.
Okay.
Because Covey, he's challenging this really common idea we have, this win-lose mentality it's everywhere.
That's true.
Like, we approach so many things, negotiations at work, disagreements with family, even just casual conversations, with this idea that for someone to win, someone else has to lose.
Oh, totally. It's like that in business all the time. In politics, you see it everywhere. So how do we break out of that then?
Well, it starts with believing that there's always another way. Even in situations that seem like, okay, someone's got to come out on top, it's about shifting our mindset from how can I win to how can we both win?
Okay, I like that, but I'm not gonna lie, part of me is like, is that really possible? Is that just being naive?
No, not at all. And Covey actually gives this great example. It's about this businessman, right? He's about to close this huge deal. Would have been really profitable for him, but he realized it wasn't actually good for the other party involved.
Oh, wow. So what do you do?
He walked away.
Seriously?
Yeah, even though it was risky,
Mm.
you know. But guess what happened? A few months later, this even bigger, even better opportunity came along.
So it actually worked out better for him in the end.
Way better.
Ugh.
Because he was willing to hold out for that win-win. He ended up with something even greater than he could imagine initially.
Okay, that's a pretty convincing story. I'm starting to see how this could play out. So it's about trust then, like having faith that things will work out, even if you don't have all the answers right away.
Exactly. A long game.
Okay, and that leads us to what? The next habit.
You got a habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Oh, I like this one already.
It's so powerful, and it builds on that idea of trust, right? Because how often do we go into conversations just ready to make our point?
Oh, all the time.
Right. Like we've already got our arguments lined up, our defenses ready, but real communication, the kind that actually builds those lasting connections, it requires us to do something kind of radical to actually listen, like really listen to the other person.
It's funny how hard that can be sometimes, to really listen, I mean.
It is. It's a skill, you
Yeah.
know? And like any skill, it takes practice. But the rewards are huge because when we feel truly heard, truly understood, that's when we can start to build that foundation of trust and respect. And from there, you can have those really meaningful connections and collaborations.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Like, you can't build a house if you're both trying to lay the foundation in opposite directions, right? You got to be on the same page, and that starts with understanding each other.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And speaking of building something together, that brings us to habit 6, synergize.
Okay, I think I know where this is going. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Kind of, but it's bigger than that.
Hmm.
Synergy is this idea that when we bring our unique perspectives, our talents, our experiences to the table, we can create something so much greater than what we could do on our own.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually, make that happen? Especially when, like, personalities clash or whatever.
Well, it's about recognizing that those differences, they're actually valuable, right? It's like, think about a choir.
Sure.
Each voice on its own is good, but when they all come together in harmony, that's when it becomes something really special.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's about finding that harmony, that balance, even when things get a little messy. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. So we've talked about the private victories, that's about mastering ourselves, and the public victories, which is all about building those strong, healthy, and honestly, really effective relationships with others. But we still haven't talked about that last habit, the one you mentioned earlier.
Yes. Habit 7. This one's important.
Okay, hit me with it.
Sharpen the saw. It's all about renewal.
Renewal.
Yeah. Taking care of ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because if we don't, we can't really be effective in any area of our lives.
And
Right?
it's like you can't pour from an empty cup and all that.
You got it.
I feel like this one's especially tough these days with how busy everyone is. It's easy to let self-care slide when there's always work to be done or emails to answer or, life stuff.
Oh, absolutely. It's a constant battle, right? But Covey says it's essential, not just for our own well-being, but for everything else we do. Like, think about a lumberjack, right?
Okay.
If they keep trying to cut down trees without ever stopping to sharpen their saw, what's going to happen?
That saw's going to get dull pretty quickly.
Exactly. And it's the same with us. We have to invest in activities that, recharge our batteries, nourish us, help us grow.
Okay, so what does sharpening the saw actually look like?
That's the beauty of it. It's different for everyone.
Yeah.
But it could be exercise, spending time in nature, meditating, reading, learning something new, anything that fills you back up.
I like that. So it's about finding what works for you and making it a priority. This has been amazing. I have to say, when we started this deep dive, I didn't realize how much depth there was to the 7 habits. It's so much more than like a self-improvement book. It's really about building a life of like intention and integrity. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And the best part is it's not about achieving some kind of perfection,
Yeah.
right? Like Covey even says, these aren't just steps you check off a list and then you're done. It's a journey, it's ongoing, and we're all going to stumble along the way.
It's comforting to hear that, honestly. So before we go, what's something our listeners can take away from this? Like, what's one thing they could start doing today to, I don't know, put these habits into practice?
That's a great question. I think it goes back to that idea of choice.
Mm.
Like starting today, see if you can find just one small area where you can be a little bit more proactive, a little more intentional, a little bit more win-win in your thinking. It doesn't have to be some big dramatic thing, just one small shift and see what happens.
I love that. Start small, stay consistent, and watch the change happen. This has been an incredible deep dive into the 7 habits. Thank you all for joining us. And remember, the real journey starts now.